For the better part of 6 years, Richard Blaine dedicated his life to this cause, financially supported through philanthropic contributions from like-minded seekers of truth. From this avenue, he encountered a man by the name of Houston Winthrop, our old friend, that devil. Houston approached Blaine while he was on the trail of the starry wisdom cult at home in Arkham. He set Blaine to obtaining an extremely rare tome entitled The Dream of the Nameless God, as well as clues to discovering ancient occult artifacts known only as the Azathoth Stones. Houston's contributions to Blaine's bank account were more than generous, so much so that he put aside his investigation into the starry wisdom for a time and focused solely on this new cause. Within a few months, Blaine's suspicions were aroused. He soon began to fear that Winthrop's intentions were far less than benevolent, and rightfully so. Suspicions that were confirmed when he, quite by chance, happened upon a photograph of Winthrop taken in 1848, impossibly making the man 191 years old. Taking what little research he had, Blaine went into hiding, now deciding to shift his focus to investigating Winthrop himself. Sometime later, he was set upon while sleeping fitfully in a dingy motel room in Arizona. He was bound, wrist and ankle, hooded and stuffed into the trunk of a vehicle. He was driven for miles, jostled and bumped. When the trunk was finally opened, he was panting, drenched in sweat and barely conscious. Unceremoniously, he was hauled from the vehicle and dropped to the hot sands of the Arizona desert. The hood was torn from his head, and he was temporarily blinded by the harsh midday sun. Surrounding him in a semicircle were 8 men, all heavily armed. They each wore leather jackets in the manner of a biker gang, though one man stood out amidst them. He was well over 6 feet in height, if not an even 7. He was dark-haired, bearded, and broad-shouldered in stature, more a Viking from the pages of Pulp Fiction than a mere biker thug. The man seemed to exude fear, and Blaine found himself shrinking away from this titan unconsciously. I may be projecting a bit and letting the prose take me. I felt this same way the first time I found myself in the presence of Jim Reed. Reed told me he greeted Blaine for the first time with his "Hello, little rabbit" quip. I'm sure all of his fellows laughed greasily. That was it for Richard Blaine. He was now property of the Devil's Sons, in the same way I had been monkey on a string. For the next 3 months, Reed told Blaine of another world. This world, a place full of corruption but unlimited power and possibility. His usual bullshit. Reed wanted Blaine in his wheelhouse. Why? You may have already guessed, but like me, Blaine could feel thins. I'm told Blaine made a study of losing his mind, feigning stupors and a lack of wit. He followed Reed's orders like that of a faithful, albeit stupid hound, absorbing everything he saw and heard, much in the same way I did in those early days. Blaine was eventually dragged to the Sonoran Desert in California, at its closest point to the Mexico border. Their purpose in the Sonoran Desert was to find a specific thin. Reed said it took Blaine months to fully develop his ability to feel them. I'm sure he was unsettled once he could. He would have realized they were everywhere, like a raw spot, or like the stomach of a corpulent corpse, engorged with gastric acid, skin stretched taut and ready to burst. 3 months in the sweltering heat, and the special thin Reed was looking for was discovered by Blaine. He would have felt it as well as seen it. A thin that size, a wavering distortion above an outcropping of desert rock, like a sickness of the air, pustulant greens and yellows, the very atmosphere vibrating and straining. The adept who wrote of this in his journal said that Richard Blaine lifted a shaky hand to point at the disruption before emptying his stomach onto the desert floor. In the rays of the setting sun, Blaine looked on as Reed tore a hole between dimensions. From a leather sack, Reed produced a small black statuette that he then tossed into the night-black void of the rend. The undulating edges firmed, and the black portal continued to grow until it was roughly 200 feet in diameter. "Dinner time," the journal claims, Reed shouted good-naturedly. "Come and get it." From the inky nothingness of the void, a single cyclopean tentacle emerged. The ropey appendage was covered in reddish hooks, bits of slimy fur, and small, slavering, toothsome mouths. The journal claimed this tentacle could have easily wrapped itself around a Sherman tank, in much the same way a man could close his hand around that of a beetle. Quickly following the tentacle was a hoofed leg covered in the same mucilaginous fur. The leg from bent knee to hoof was roughly the size of a 5-story building. It stomped to the ground as more tentacles lashed through the rend. Blaine was said to have retained consciousness long enough to see it begin to squeeze its bulk through the rip in the fabric of reality before falling into what I would guess to be blessed ignorance. I lose track of Blaine at this point. I know he was taken into this world by Reed while still inert and unconscious. He was left at a settlement and somehow escaped back to our world. As previously stated, Reed had him tracked down and incarcerated. Blaine and another man by the name of Randall Frost, stored away until needed again, I would assume. There was fear of Blaine allying himself with that Fisher fellow I mentioned. For some reason, that thought disturbed Reed greatly. I once asked Reed about Nicholas Fisher, and that great oaf actually snarled at me and raised a clenched fist in warning. I let the topic lie. The section of the Adept's journal that I believe detailed this Fisher fellow was torn out, as was the section on Professor Wentworth. So that is all I know of Professor Richard Blaine. I have spent this time writing, and I feel I am no closer to the truth than I was when I began. There's something tugging at the corners of my mind, like a dream forgotten. Some pieces from this man's story that I'm not putting together in the proper order. A damnable puzzle. There's something here in this tale, and I cannot find it. I am tired and I am hungry. I will return to this topic again. The tyranny of Hazat. It has been at least 3 weeks since I left the settlement. I have admittedly been suffering a deep malaise. The desire to write or sketch has not been within me. Today, I have learned disquieting news, burdened with revelations, and I find myself once more driven to put word and image to paper. This evening, I met an elderly man named Ebenezer of all things, who claims to have recently abandoned his home in a place he called the Plains of Botash. Dominating the skyline, there is a black pyramid, a monument, he says, built to the god Hazat over 6,000 years ago. He said it contains the remains of the 7 original priests of Hazat, though now it is home to one Houston Winthrop. Pieces have begun to fall into place. Pieces I didn't realize I possessed until this old man rambled on through the better part of the day and evening, unknowingly filling in the blanks and tying facts together. Richard Blaine's story was indeed prophetic. I now know what Houston Winthrop is. At least I think I do. He is the duality. He is both man and God. He is the avatar of Hazat. Somehow, in the late 1800s, he became inexplicably bound with this god, he and it becoming the same. This resulted in the murder of his circle, and is the fount from which his perpetual life springs. He lives within and without time. For him, time does not exist as it does for us. He is everywhere and always. He is part of this place, and it a part of him. I would gamble all of Reed's powers are leached from Hazard and this place. The old man says that cultists of Hazard have flooded the plains of Botash. They speak of a great revelation, some cosmic event that will split the fabric of realities and join dimensional planes into one. This is the endgame. This is the apocalyptic event Reed has hinted at. Hazard means to supplant all the gods and become the Godhead. Somehow he is bound to the form that was Houston Winthrop. For now, my thought is that once this event occurs, this great revelation, he will transcend. This completion of this event is somehow tied up with the mining of ore from Gideon's mine. I haven't figured out how that comes into play, but things Reed has said leads me to firmly believe that. Maybe this Richard Blaine knows. He knows of Akkad. He knows of this kind of melding with man and God. Can Winthrop and Hazard be separated? Or maybe that is just foolishness on my part. This inner fight against the dread that is filling me. All of my plots and mechanizations are now meaningless. I have to change tack. But to what? With all of this new knowledge and speculation, I am left with one question and one question alone. How does one stop a god?